Joining us now to break down the day's international headlines is Lisa Daftari, a foreign policy expert and the editor of the Foreign Desk. So, Lisa, I want to start with the Julian Assange news because it kind of overlaps on a lot of different subjects, not only abroad, but here in the U.S. as well. You could talk about elections, national security, foreign diplomacy. Really, all of these things come under the umbrella. So what does today's decision by that court in the U.K. really mean for this topic?
You know, it depends on what your political persuasion is, how you look at this. I think there's a takeaway for everyone. Look, you can say this was freedom of speech, freedom of the press. This guy was doing his job. You can say that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. There are murderers who get less time than he's looking at. And other people are wondering whether or not this guy will be pardoned by President Trump before the end of his presidency. It's interesting. This guy has become such a symbolic case on all of the subjects that you mentioned. And I think many are waiting to see what happens. He was not allowed to come back to the United States basically for psychiatric reasons. They're afraid that he will take his own life. So the UK court didn't really say whether they buy into the freedom of speech or the fact, or I should say, the allegation that he stole documents or how he obtained them, etc. So we don't know how they feel about the details of the case, but we know that for now they will not permit him to come back to the United States.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. Even the judge in that case said that he went beyond the practice of a journalist, but still ultimately decided with him and his lawyers. So I think that it's kind of parsing together the two different arguments and trying to kind of be stuck in the same limbo that a lot of people are. They don't necessarily know where this is without bringing politics into it, which I think is an unfortunate part of any litigation. But I do want to move on to Iran, because that is something that seems to be more immediate and something that could change more so depending on possible Biden administration taking shape. We know that, of course, Joe Biden was part of the 2015 nuclear deal, and we are hearing today that Iran is not abiding by those terms. They're enriching uranium at numbers that we haven't seen since then. Is that problematic in the sense, are they putting together, I should say, perhaps leverage to go into a new negotiation?
Yeah, that's probably the best word for it, leverage. We've never seen them be as boastful or as arrogant as they're currently being. Taking to social media, the foreign minister Zarif is actually bragging about the fact that they are enriching uranium beyond the level at which was previously permitted. And they're saying that they've notified the IAEA, they've notified the UN. So basically a lot of chest thumping before the Biden administration comes in. And as for the Biden foreign policy, we don't know anything about what they will do, other than the fact that they want to do an about face on all of President Trump's accomplishments. The one thing that they've almost been a bit more specific about is alluding to the fact that they would get back into the Iran nuclear deal, perhaps. We obviously know that the Obama administration was quite friendly with Iran's regime, giving them all of that money and getting into a nuclear deal, which gave us nothing in return. Now, the times have changed. The realities on the ground have changed. The pressure campaign that Trump has applied towards Iran has worked. We know that it has worked. Now, what will the Biden administration do with these facts? They're inconvenient truths for them if they truly want to get back into the Iran nuclear deal, ignoring what is going on with the Iran regime.
And when we look at escalation, too, I mean, of course, we're just, I believe, 1 year away from the General Soleimani killing. I mean, that seems like forever ago. It's been a long year, but that just does put things in perspective a little bit. And here we are, just over the past couple of days, we've seen Iran now enrich uranium, seize a South Korean tanker, and make very vile remarks about Israel, which isn't necessarily anything new, but it has ramped up. Does that suggest that perhaps they do feel a little bit more enabled under the possibility of a Biden administration taking place, and really that should speak about the negotiations more broadly? Do you think that's the way to look at it?
It's almost like how children believe when the new babysitter shows up for the first hour or so. They're like, maybe we can call the shots here. That's exactly what they're doing. They're basically saying, we will behave this way if you don't get back into the deal with us. That deal was a perfect cover for the Iranian regime. They got to do whatever they wanted abroad. They put all that money back into terrorism, into Iraq, and into Syria and into Yemen, and the list goes on, Gaza, etc., really financing all of their terror activities, while at the same time being able to say to the Iranian people that we've normalized relations with the West. Meanwhile, the biggest Achilles heel of the Iranian regime remains the people of Iran. And I talk to those people day in and day out. And guess what? Even though the pressure campaign is hard on them, even though the sanctions are hard on them, they're willing to take that, to endure it. As one man told me in an interview, it's almost like an operation that we have to have, meaning it's very difficult, but we know that this will actually potentially lead us to the outcome that we want, meaning a regime change, meaning real significant change in their lives on a daily basis. So, we have to look at the facts on the ground. Just can't look at this piece of paper. We can't look at kumbaya that we had under the Obama administration. Where did that really get us?
Mm.
And I hope that the Biden administration looks at the reality of today and not of 8 years ago.
And you bring up a really good point, but it's the idea that the Iranian people are almost making these type of changes or demanding these changes more organically. And in fact, it was Ben Rhodes right after President Obama left office. He said himself that one of the biggest regrets is not supporting the Iranian people at a time where they were naturally uprising and really trying to show their voice in front of an oppressive regime. And I think that is something, too, that I think a lot of people are worrying that we could return back to that foreign policy. And it's problematic for a lot of people that saw, for example, drone strikes increase in Yemen, Lebanon, countries like that, and people not really being supported at times where they need it the most. So I think there are a lot of concerns for a lot of people. But Lisa Daftari, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight, breaking down the issues abroad. Thank you.
My pleasure.